Okay, welcome back. Last time we got into HTML basics a little bit and we built our own website using HTML and also incorporating a little bit of JavaScript. This time we're going to take a detour from the fundamentals and just jump right into cross-site scripting, or XSS, as an introduction. So for the next couple of minutes we're going to be talking about what XSS is, identify the vectors a little bit, then also be able to identify the actual risks of XSS or cross-site scripting. Okay, so real quick, what is cross-site scripting? Cross-site scripting is when a malicious user is able to inject and execute their own JavaScript into a website. Think of how bad it could be if somebody were to run their own JavaScript into Facebook or MySpace, which it has been in the past, or even Amazon. Imagine if you logged into your Amazon account and some attacker had their own JavaScript code running in the background. They'd be able to see all of your purchases. They may be able to take credit card information and things like that. But we'll get into more of those details a little bit later. As an attacker, though, the mindset should be, if there's a page where I can supply my own content, I can supply my own payloads, things like that, you should be thinking, how can I get my code into this website and running? And there are three primary types of cross-site scripting, first of which is reflected. This one is pretty simple. The user input is immediately returned right back to the user. Might not make too much sense now, but we're going to get into an example in a couple of minutes. There is also stored, which is oftentimes referred to as persistent cross-site scripting. This is when the cross-site scripting payload itself is actually stored by the application and then later retrieved by the user. So one example of this might be, let's say somebody used a malicious string to save as their username for a website. That user, which is normally stored in a database, is now malicious and will run code. So every time somebody visits particular pages that load that username, for example, that payload is going to be executed over and over and over again. And then, of course, there's DOM-based. DOM-based is a little bit more tricky, but the data is supplied directly to the DOM, and then eventually it kind of trickles into the website. So how does XSS work? There are two primary factors that come into place with an XSS. The first of which is a source. Every cross-site scripting needs a source, or in this case a source. There's no good way to visualize a source, but you would have some kind of input field. Maybe you're filling out a questionnaire, you're entering your details in a website, first name and last name or something like that. But it's a way of you providing your own strings to the website. Could also take place in the form of a query parameter in the URL somewhere. Or it could be data from the database. The source could just be a malicious string that was supplied, stored in a database, and then later retrieved. But at the end of the day, though, that source is going to contain some kind of malicious string, such as the script tag that you see, alert XSS. And essentially, it's data that is not validated and completely trusted. Usually, cross-site scripting comes about when the maintainers of an application or a website blindly trust whatever the user is providing. And then they just kind of feed that content right back into the website. Where the content actually ends up is what we call the sink. So the source ends up in the sink. A sink example would be inner HTML, an attribute of the actual DOM. So document, for example, document element, inner HTML is whatever. But if the website is supplying that source back into its own sink, that's when things become problematic. So one example that we have, and we're going to get into how this works in a little bit too, is let's say there is a query parameter that a website is using. This is typical for search functions if you're searching for people or places on a website, or date ranges, things like that, and you can supply your own search parameters in the URL itself. In this case, that's our source. We provided a malicious payload, and then what happens is when you navigate to the website and you execute that URL with the malicious string in it, it'll execute. And what will happen in this particular case is that the source ends up in the sink, which is right in the inner HTML of an element that we can now control. So one thing that wasn't totally apparent when I was learning about cross-site scripting is what are the actual risks. Yes, it's great to have little pop-ups that alert on a user's page. It's sometimes funny, but what are the actual implications of this attack being carried out, and why is it so severe when it comes to certain bug bounties? The biggest of which is that you can steal data. If you are able to inject your script into the website, the script that you're injecting is going to be run within the context of that website and within the domain of that website. So there isn't a ton that is off limits to the attacker in this case. So depending on how the application is set up, depending on how they have their cookies configured, cookies can be stolen. An attacker can use those cookies to replay a user session on another browser. So let's say, tying this back to the Amazon example, if you're able to take all of a user's Amazon cookies and replay them in your browser, you could impersonate a completely different customer. Then you can start making payment purchases on their behalf, ship things to your house or somewhere else, things like that. So it's not too good. In addition to that, you can also interact with the end user once a browser is hooked. There are tools out there, specifically one called Beef, which is the browser exploitation framework that has a lot of built-in commands to interact with an end user once their browser has been hooked by a cross-site scripting payload. So what you can do with Beef is you can actually launch attacks against a user. You can send them alerts, you can send them prompts, you can collect information from them, and then it starts to teeter into the social engineering aspect of hacking, where you can interact with the user directly, you can trick them into providing you information. Keystroke logging goes again with interacting with the end user. If their browser is hooked, you could use different tools out there to act as keystroke loggers. So when a person is typing sensitive information into a website, for example, maybe a credit card or a password, those keystrokes are going to be sent back to you. All right, so here we have our website from before. It's been modified slightly with some additional functionality to make this work, but we're just going to be going over the basics. So at the top of the screen, we have a URL, and you'll see at the end we have $Q equals user, which is our query parameter. And you'll see if we start putting in text, for example, hello, that information is going to be rendered on the screen. So right off the bat, we've already identified our source. Our source is going to be a query parameter. And we can just start adding arbitrary text, and that'll be stored in the HTML. We use our tools to inspect the element. We'll be able to see how it gets injected within these H3 tags. So now, to take this a little bit step further, we can try one of the most basic scripts, and we're going to alert domain and see if this works. And it doesn't execute. And this is not uncommon because a lot of cross-site scripting depends on the context of where you find the sync and where the source ends up, or I'm sorry, where the sync ends up with the source. But in this case, we may have to try a different tag in order to get script to execute. And there are lots of different payloads out there. One, for example, that I really like to use is an image tag. So if you inject an image tag and you specify a blank source, the image will error out loading, and we can provide an on-error handler that will trigger when the image fails to load. So what that looks like is this. So since there's no actual domain for this website, it returns as blank. But you'll see that we can start adding our own arbitrary text. If this website has sensitive information on it, we could scrape the website, we could hook it using a tool like Beef. We could also have it send cookies back to us depending on what security configurations there are in place as well. Alright, so that'll do it for this very brief introduction on cross-site scripting. It is a very wide topic that covers a very large range of attacks, but I wanted to take a break from the normal groundwork in order to get this going. Next up, we're going to be getting into JavaScript basics. To write JavaScript, so when you do find an attack like this, you know how to make use of it. And then after that, we're going to get into the actual DOM, so exploring the browser itself and what's available to us, not only as hackers, but also developers a little bit. And we'll see you then.